I get mad of Shabbos.
Welcome back, my dear friends, to another episode of Around the Shabbos Table. I do apologize, and I appreciate that all those people, all of you who reached out to us about a non-episode, our no-show last week. My co-host, the father, was not here, so we were unable to record. And Baruch Hashem, we are back better than ever. And we have
had an excused absence.
This is the excuse. We're giving the excuse right now.
Oh, I apologize.
Anyways, I'll take us all out, so don't worry about that. Meaning you can just take out any part I want. I could even put that nod into me saying something obscene, and you're like...
But
so be careful.
You're not going to say anything obscene.
Okay, this week we have a really great guest, a fun guest, somebody who I don't know if I could have booked him. I might have been nervous or prepared too much had I actually booked him months in advance. But he showed up at my house. He showed up at my father's house. And I said, you come on the pod? To which he answered, what's a podcast? To which I said, just sit here in front of the mic and it will be awesome. And he agreed. So we have with us today my uncle, the chilled uncle, Uncle Lewis, Rabbi Lewis Wienerkur, who, just for those of you who are unfamiliar, I'll give a little background. So Rabbi Lewis Wienerkur has a career in the rabbinate and Jewish classroom education for over not 35 years, 36 years. He was both a Rebbi in the Westchester Hebrew High School and in HAFTR in the 5 towns. He's also the education director of Camp Morasha and CPA at his family's firm. So that is my uncle.
You forgot Rabbi at the Woodsburgh minyan.
I said rabbinate.
Oh.
Doesn't work?
No, it's great. As a matter of fact.
You just have to flex the Woodsburgh minyan.
No, because your father, when Zaidi died, your father came to David at the minyan, and your father had like this combination. A, he was an Avelus, and B, he was like a rabbi of people who were not yet there sometimes, or people listening from La Jolla. I don't mean you. But anyway, so he would go, Yizgadal, V'Yizgadash, and every other Avil in the minyan was already up to Minyan Heshmei Rabbah. So, he was not happy, right? Correct?
Right, but no, I learned something important when I was in your shul. I learned, I asked you, first of all, I asked you, do you speak on Shabbos? To which you responded, speak. They will let me speak. And then I said, it's a little fast here. I said, oh, well, that's our motto. Ivdu es Hashem b'meira.
Very good. You quoted me from your pulpit.
Yeah.
Somebody came back and said, your brother-in-law quoted me from La Jolla. All right, so I had to add that. That's why, because I have a great story with your father from 1995.
Oh, you were rabbi that long?
Interesting question. Yes.
It was always just a Shabbos gig?
No. It started in 92, I think. I was just a regular guy there in the balabas. It's in a guy's sunroom. And the balabas didn't like the conversations that were happening, shall we say. So he asked me to speak, and that sort of morphed into when we went one Shabbos morning a month, and then when the English Woodmere went under construction, actually in 1995, we went to every Shabbos. And then we added Yontif, they added Hashkama. Okay.
Amazing. So I want to add something onto Uncle Lewis's, Rabbi Wienerkur's resume.
Lewis.
So besides the fact that he happens to be married to my sister, besides the fact, and I say this seriously, not tongue in cheek, but besides the fact that he happens to be seriously one of the funniest people that I know, one of the most spontaneous people I know, but he also happens to be one of the most insightful people that I know, and that he has the ability to be able to see something and see right into the center of things. And that's what I'm excited about tonight's episode, because I am excited about the comedy, but I'm also very excited to hear his insights into we usually have a good go at each other with the way that we see the world, but he has a really great perspective on it, and I think that's like sit back and relax, because there's something great to learn tonight on the insights that we're gonna hear.
Well, it should be noted that if I say anything really crazy, you mentioned that point about me being married to your sister, she may have another opinion about that if I really embarrass the family. So just putting that out there.
Wait, I edit this alone. Nobody else is allowed to sit in that editing room with me. We don't ask.
Oh, very good. Okay, so I think you covered my... when Dr. Lyman, not to compare myself, this is not false modesty, this is just the truth. So Dr. Lyman gets introduced as, who he is, like the president of this and the professor of that. And he always says, so you see, I can't hold the job. So I guess I could try that joke. All these things you said, I can't hold the job.
Can I unpack that for a second? I always wonder this about you. Are these three passions being...
I have only one passion.
Okay.
Paying bills for your aunt. That's my only passion.
So that's where the Rebbi comes in.
That's where everything.
That's where the Rebbi comes in. But what?
I would drive a bus at night if I could. Like just the other day, we were in the living room. So Rabbi Willig's daughter, Adina Wolf's a Rebbetzin in Woodmere. So I teaching her son Tulane. She has 5 sons. I'm up to kid 4. So she comes and she hacks with your aunt for, the whole lesson. So the bar mitzvah boy and I walked into the room afterwards, and we heard the following conversation. Adina says to me, "By Tomer Adina El Melissa, that pillow on that couch matches the pillow on the chair." I think that's what she said, because again, so I turned to the bar mitzvah boy and I said, "Yaakov, 3 words, Shalo Asani Isha." Thankfully, we didn't understand what they said. We weren't interested in what they said, but like they were, So the pillow on the couch has to match the pillow on the chair or whatever. But is that?
No, I'm curious. I was just curious about that. Do you define yourself as a Rav, as a Rebbe, as a CPA?
It's funny you should say that, because my father always would complain every single time somebody would call in the office about HAFTR or about Morashah or about somebody who needed a chesed. Sometimes, I'm sure this is a shock to you being his kid, but like they managed to, find someone who's busy to ask rather than somebody who's not busy. So my father would always say, "What, do you come into this office just to take care of your other projects?" Whereas, sometimes in school they would say, "Well, he's really, his head's not here, he's preparing tax returns." I don't know. Maybe I can't sit still.
That probably has what to do with it. But
Maybe.
it's always interesting to me, because it's like we, at least in the world I'm in, we're looking very much for definition within our careers. Our careers help define who we are, which is probably the negative part of our either definition or careers. But when I look at you and I see that you're able to put all these 3 together and work with it, I think it's something unique.
There's a tzad hashava. There's a tzad hashava between all of them, and that's helping people, because his accountancy. I won't go into any details, but his accountancy is really about helping people. It's not just about parnasa. It's really about helping
at this
people.
point, Rabbi Willig would say, "Wait, this is not my eulogy. Stop."
Yeah.
No, I'm asking.
I disagree with RJ from LJ, which story on that too. So
RW from WP.
correct, which I'm going to explain. So it's Hatzad Shoshbahen is you get to know what's going on in people's lives, but etzem amayenta. Now the problem is, as a Rebbe, as a CPA, you can't repeat what you know, but I like to know. I like to know. So your father's email address. Let's explain. Happens to be a young fella, a fellow who died young, I should say, who I don't want to say whatever because it might be a little embarrassing, but a Gewaldiker person, Rabbi Jeff in my age, a guy I knew, sadly. So he told me once, he said, "So I'm driving to La Jolla, and I'm driving south, and I don't see it, and I don't see it, and I don't see it. And I hit the Mexican border, and I say, I missed it. So I turned around, and I see a sign. I said, La Jolla? Is La Jolla La Jolla?" I'm sure you got that in your career.
Many times.
So right. So for those who don't know, Rabbi Wohlgelerter's email address is RJ from LJ. Now, Ahron doesn't remember this, but in the 90s, when AOL would send those discs, and you had 30 hours of internet, and you had to decide on your email name, basically after the 30 hours ended, you had 20 minutes, and then the tape disintegrated or whatever. So I had to come up with one. I couldn't come up with one. So he was RJ from LJ, Rabbi Jeff from La Jolla, which made perfect sense. So I foolishly copied him poorly, and I'm RW from WP, Rabbi Wienerkur from Woodmere Place. It's ridiculous and terrible. But anyway, it was just copying your father. Akiva Wienerkur, who won't let me listen to his podcast, Is this what you mean by me trying to talk and not stopping? Right?
No, I'll tell you what.
Anyway, so Akiva Wienerkur was in whatever, and I don't know.
Just talk into the mic.
Akiva Wienerkur was in primary school in those heady days of the AOL disc, and he couldn't come up with a name, so I got frustrated with him. He liked the number 26. He's born on the 26th. Has nothing to do with Yud Kei Vav Kei. He just his birthday's on the 26th. So I said, no name 26. So he hated the name until, of course, what happened. And this you're going to see. How old's Meira? 8. Right. So once she reaches a stage of 12, you could have thought X, and it would have been the dumbest thing in the world. But if some other nut in her class, some other idiot in her class likes it or respects it, right? So Akiva Wienerkur thought no name 26 was embarrassed. Then Vayhi Hayom, some high school friend of his said, oh, that's a great name. Ooh, that was a great name, right? So anyway, I don't know how we got onto email names, but okay.
Okay, so I wanted to get more into. That's interesting to me. We got into that from just your different titles, your different jobs, your different things you do. Everything comes back to email at the end of the day, eh?
Certainly. But after you were born,
True.
right? People did communicate. So now, Rabbi Jeff, of course, can we say this? He was a player, right? So I was, not a player. The only
We just give context, not while he was aroused, right?
No, of course not while I was aroused. I was 18 years old, with his long hair before he went to Nair. So, I was that guy that girls said, he's got a big mouth, whatever. He's not so tall. So, I was that guy, I liked the girl, but the other guy liked her too. You won't understand what I'm saying right now, so your father will. So, but I was wondering, is he calling her? So I'd call her and I'd get a busy signal. And then, of course, you have to call him to find out if he gets a busy signal. And then that really makes me pathetic. Cut that one out, because Melissa will really bring me to the Beis Din to end it all on that story.
Okay, so we can get into Rabbanas here, but maybe we'll have to do a separate, a full series. I'm sort of saving that for the series of us interviewing other Rabbanim, maybe out-of-town Rabbanim. It's going to be an interesting series, but I wanted to get into a little bit of the education part of your life. But I think that's what my father said. That's the tzad hashava. It's something you're knowing,
Trying to help
helping.
people is what he said.
Listen, you don't have to comment on it.
Okay, there it is. Sorry.
Let me. No, I'm saying that.
Well, thank
I'm
you.
saying if I'm the
thank you.
outside, that
I can marry your sister. I'm allowed. I'm a nice guy.
It's a separate issue.
And so I thought that education was an interesting place to go. And I mentioned it last night. Also, you're a Rebbi, an educator who stays up to date, who's up to date with he doesn't take the role of being this, older fellow and wise fellow. That's not your role in the classroom. And in order to do that, you have to you have to know more. You have to be up to date. You have to understand the kids. And that was one part of what I wanted to talk to you about, which we'll go to. But I thought of this interesting question. You could break apart the question, as you heard before the episode. My brother already did, who is our fact checker. Anytime we make mistakes here, Yona.
Is Yona Wogi?
Oh, yes. Yona will call and say, no. This was the year. This was the date.
Oh, wow.
And I remember because I have I remember because I have a receipt from the ice cream we bought. So do not say anything false here. So I was thinking of a scenario that would paint of a certain classroom, and then you would be able to, and it's really to both of you. That's the idea. And I want to hack that out. That's the point here. So would you rather teach a class and have a classroom full of kids who were respectful, were cordial, were nice to you, were good in the classroom, but at the end of the day, you see over the years that your message is just not going through? Or would you rather a classroom of disgruntled, angry kids who make your time in the classroom difficult to get through to them as you feel, but over the years you see that things that are directly related to things you've said and messages you've given over, they actually get into the head, and you see them making changes based on things that you did, but over years. What's an ideal classroom for you, and why?
And you're asking both of us.
So Uncle Os, you started.
But first of all, as you were asking the question, I thought you were going in a different direction. Like you, let's go with the second class. The second class, you're angry, disgruntled, right? In the first class, I thought you were going in a different direction, but you basically said, kids who do well but don't really, imbibe the message. Is that what you said?
Right. That
Meaning
was
the A class, the kids who just do well in Torah classes because it's a class, like they do well in
correct.
Right. So I didn't know if you were going that way.
Maybe not even that. Maybe we could build the question as we wish, but maybe even to kids who are listening, maybe not even in A class, but kids who are listening, they're good kids. They're kind kids. They're listening. They know how to respect the parents, taught them how to respect the teacher.
And then, so two other things. So also, I thought you were going in the direction of, and this is clearly being 61, and as you said, doing it 36 years, you have kids who you thought would be at a certain place, Latov, when they were in high school. And I certainly, there were kids that you thought, oh no, this kid, is not going to amount to anything. And of course, Nischalfa Hashita, right? No, so the kid who had this great promise ended up being Jewishly, not that that's up to me to decide, but who are we kidding? And the kid who was angry and disgruntled ended up finding his stride. So I thought maybe that's where you're going. And of course, the second thing I was going to say, ties into that point, that when I was 30, I got annoyed that, how come I'm not getting the top classes? Here's the thing. Any Shmendrik can teach the top class. Any Rebbe you ever had, right? And actually, your father went to Hank with like an all-star roster of Talmidei Chachamim as Rebbeim, and they were teaching what percent of the kids in your class were Shomer Shabbos? 40? Less. Right? So any guy who, how much do you have to know, honestly, to teach modern Orthodox kids, K through 12? So I thought, I need the honors class. And in fact, it's much more rewarding. It's much harder. And like I said, and therefore, you see payros down the road, the kids who, are harder to teach, even though day to day, it could be annoying because you don't necessarily feel your message is getting across.
Rabbi Will, who was the quintessential Talmid Chacham, he was way out of his milieu. I mean, he was a yeshivish person before really there was a culture of yeshivish people. He used to talk to us about daf yomi. First, he had to explain to us what a daf was, and then what a yomi is, and then we could get excited about it. And he wrote a sefer on krisos. I mean, we didn't even have a shot that krisos was part of Shas. I mean, it wasn't even a half. But he used to say that I'm going to tell you things now, and in 10 years you're going to say to yourself, "Oh, that's what Crazy Whale used to say." And every guy that became something, and even people that not necessarily became so frum, but they'll tell you that years later his messages resonated because they were in different places and different places in their lives, and the messages were able to resonate. And that's to be able to teach kids that you're sort of fighting uphill, so that that if you're fighting uphill, something's going in. It's when they're sitting passively and they're doing what they have to do, and they're shaking their heads and they're saying yes, and what pasuk are we on, Rebbi? Oh, I just want to find the best.
Is it on the test?
Yeah, is it on the test? That's right. It's very, very often that's it's nothing. Like you just want to shake them up a little bit, give me something to work with.
I saw a guy. I try not to give identifying characteristics, but he was a good kid, good home, but I didn't really have a big kesher with him. And he's a Rebbi in a yeshiva, and not in a yeshiva katana, in a post-high school yeshiva. And I bumped into him recently, and he said that he had just turned 40, and he remembers me talking about turning 40 and referencing Rabbi Akiva, my standard line. I say to kids, you haven't learned the word, you're 17, it's okay. You start now, you have a 23-year head start on Rabbi Akiva, right? So, the Gemara about not understanding your Rebbe till 40, at the age of 40, after 40 years, So the kid said he still remembers it. I said, you realize, of course, that I had just turned 40 when you were in my class. He said, now that you're saying it, I realize it. But, he remembered 20-something years later me talking about the importance of looking back similar. Not that I'm anything like Rabbi Will. Michael Salzbank, classic example of what Hank produced, right? Two kids from non-religious homes who ended up meeting and marrying one another, being religious. So Michael Salzbank said that he got in trouble because kids were coming from. So Rabbi Will said, They told me you can't talk about Torah. What am I supposed to speak about? I'm a rabbi. Will Chamberlain. So do we have to explain who that was?
No.
Oh, look at that. Well, you did good. Am I in trouble here?
No.
That was a double-edged. I was making fun of you
It's not-
being
doesn't
young
really-
and not for knowing ball. It was,
Yeah, but that doesn't really prove that you're up to date, right?
it's a good call.
By
Not up to
mentioning-
date if you don't.
if you know Will
if you're
Will
holding.
Chamberlain.
If you're
Yeah.
holding. Yeah. I also want to add. Yeah, I like the mic. Sorry. So
You know what? I'm going to cut you off. One time you taught me something. I was young.
Yeah.
And you said, you were sitting around Shabbos table. You said, I'm taking my talents to South Beach. You said,
LeBron.
No, you said, who said by who?
Oh, I tested you. Yeah.
You were testing. And I didn't know at the time. It was a while ago. I didn't know. I was like, if my uncle knows, I have to know.
Oh, wow.
And you see,
that's
Chinuch
fun.
from there. That and it really pushed me. Now,
It's funny because there was I didn't know it myself. A kid in my HAFTR 12th grade class said, I'm taking my talents to Yeshiva and Tivariyeh. I said, what? He said, Rebbi, you don't know? Well, probably he said, Rabbi. And I said, who? Because I make them call me Rebbi, right? So, and they forget every time. Why do you care? So, you don't have an opinion about what you want to be called. Anyway, so I only knew that because the Talmud.
oh, so we're
Gemara and
passing.
Tainus, Gemara and Makis, right? I learned from my Talmud. No, I want to say this. This is a serious moment. I've spent, I guess, my idea, by the way, in case you didn't have a plan, was to talk about Zadie. But okay, if you call me back another time, if I come back to Israel another time, we could talk about Zadie. But I think you may be the last grandchild to really have known him, right?
Not
So,
not
the
even
youngest, I'm
right,
saying.
the youngest.
The
But I
youngest
didn't even.
grandchild. No?
I know. Okay, say your serious point, and we'll go into Zadie as well. Yeah.
Right. No, but because it's funny that he was an educator, and all three of his married kids had at least one kid who was an educator. And my mother, Zadie lived too little, right? But my mother lived even less, and so I didn't really know her. So, but I've spent my life trying to sort of make up for that, or not feel bad about it. But she was an educator, regarding what Uncle Jeff said. He's not your uncle, I know that. Anyway, but regarding what your father said, that she taught, and not only did she teach, she held it from Chesed too. So I didn't understand that at all when I was a kid, and she died when I was a teenager. But, I guess belatedly, you pick up on something, you want to make something of yourself. So maybe what you said, if it's true, it's to her credit. Belatedly, because I promise I didn't know it when I was 16. But anyway, coming back to you cutting me off, uncutting me off.
Okay, but so then you mentioned something that you see the kid who you think is going to be all that and doesn't end up being all that, and you see the kid who is harder to deal with who ends up becoming. How is that? How is the challenging child changed over your 30 years? Obviously today's different, but this also speaks to your, being in touch with what the kids are challenged with. How does it change? What does a challenging kid look like? 25 years ago, the beginning of your career, and what does a challenging kid look like today?
I've spent most of my life in high school, so I have to go back, to when I was in high school too. I would say that, and this probably get me in trouble, but I think in the 70s, there were kids who misbehaved. But and this is disgusting terms, but whatever. The good kids were just good kids, and the troublemakers were just troublemakers. Meaning, one difference is now you could have the A-class kids, maybe not in HAFTR, of course, but in every other school, not ours. But the A-class kids will go to Florida over January vacation and drink. So, which is something that, right, in other words, in your high school.
Which was where only the real troublemakers were the real troublemakers.
Correct. Like in my head and in your head, and without names, you could think of exactly who those kids were. That's one difference, and that leads to the next point. That's something that's certainly changed since high school is nobody drank really. Kids smoked cigarettes and kids smoked pot, but drinking wasn't a thing. But now drinking has become a thing again, even for the good kids. And I'm not a drinker at all. So, I had grape juice under the chuppah. I just can't, I don't like the taste. So wine's okay, but liquor, not at all, ever really. And, I went to a wedding of a student. It was like a 25, 26-year-old kid, and I saw all these kids, and I saw how comfortable they were, like at the bar. And they're all successful in their own way, in the outside world, some from, some less from. But I saw, it's not a shavish behind. Is they're all comfortable with liquor. So that's changed too, certainly starting younger.
A Jewish problem, a frum problem, or I just wonder how much.
Global.
global
I
issue.
think they used to say that we were about 5-10 years behind, right? If you look at the Beatles, I don't have to explain, but if you look at the Beatles albums, the hair in yeshiva looked like the Beatles maybe 3, 4, 5 years later, I think. I have a great story. When I was a sophomore in MTA, Rabbi David Lifshitz saw me in the hall and went, "Sophomore in MTA." So, you knew who he was. You ever see a picture? He had this magnificent white beard that was, symmetrical, and he wore the coat, right? And he wore an up hat. And remember, this wasn't a thing. The Rav didn't wear an up hat or a long coat, and he had, a beard only after his wife died. And we off the air, that would be annoying. But anyway,
You're good.
Anyway, so Rav Devolution, come here, get a haircut. This is 1975. So I was a cool guy, but I went and got a haircut. And thinking I was going to see, I never saw him again until years later. That's a whole nother story. But anyway, I don't know how I got onto that about hair. I would say that the internet's obviously changed that. Kids don't read. I know this is classic teacher stuff, but it's true. And maybe we sound like our teachers, but kids don't read. Kids don't have an attention span. Kids have kol davar aser in their hand, right? Certainly in my classroom, and not only in my classroom. Meaning the quote unquote to the right, another silly term, but somebody asked
everyone
today in the mall. Someone said, "Do you have a TV?" Right. With some guy saw we were dosim. So in the Modi'in Mall. So some guy started with your father. Said, "Do you have a television?" So I took out my phone. I said, "I got a television right here."
They said that they came in here and they said, "Oh, you're from. We don't need to put a TV in." I said, "Who has TVs anymore?"
Right. You also have the time thing. It's not only the Presskite and the things that they're watching, but the fact that they're spending so much time on it, and that you're now dealing with a problem in the classroom with good kids also. Be dealing with a problem in the classroom. Kids are exhausted because they stay up so late watching and doing, and it just adds another level of complication. So you can have kids that are not drinking, and kids that are not even into porn, but they're just exhausted.
Wohlgelernter said the word porn. No, he's right.
And it's that one, not me.
Yeah. But I would add one more thing regarding to what your father, apropos of what your father said about Whale. There was not a cynicism then, meaning I knew there was such a thing as a guy who learned. And your father certainly knew there was such a thing as a guy who learned. And your grandparents sent him to Ner Yisrael after 11th grade in Hank, which your father points out what it was like coming there and how he dressed and how he thought. But the idea of, and this is, I think, a little bit what differentiates, the modern Orthodox world from the world that you were educated in post 8th grade, and that is that the year in Israel changed modern Orthodoxy, meaning there was no such thing as anyone learning Daf Yomi or learning on their own, really, except v'yechidim. So what happened was, starting with the 70s, when the boys and the girls started going to Israel and coming back, so yes, a lot of people, and many of the parents in my school are the products of that already. But it brings with it like a cynicism in the sense that I'm not flipping, or I'm not doing that, or I'm not becoming from, or I'm happy where I am, which you didn't have in our day. There was no thought when I'm going to BMT in 1977. How am I going to? I have to worry about how I look when I come back. Which every kid I do Israel guidance in HAFTR, they think about like what I'm going to come back. Will I be like him? Will I be like her? Right. So it didn't exist because it was still in its infancy. It was still the whole concept of serious learning on a large level was, certainly not exist in the modern world.
Right. There was a certain purity when it came to those things.
Better word. Yeah.
But I want to just go back for a second because, it could very well be that in some of our schools, we're dealing with less. You're not dealing with more destructive behavior. You're not dealing with more. With worse kind of behavior. You have when a kid falls, he falls pretty far. But on the average kid that's in trouble, right, he's in trouble, but it's still pretty relatively mild. But it's just totally different than what he was in trouble with when we were growing up. Because now he's in trouble with things that take him further away. A kid was in trouble, he was whatever, he he was attracted to other things, or he was into, in our school, he was into girls, or he was into just things that were distracting. But now the stuff that takes a kid down could be things that a little bit more troublesome. He could fall a little bit further.
Well, Rabbi Kenny Hirschhorn, who's classmate of Aunt Melissa's, went to Hank as a Rebbe in Tivarye, said, we was talking to Rabina, and he said, Rabina said, what'd you do in high school? He said, I hung out with girls and I played ball. So Rabina said, oh, normally it's a horrors, right? So, which now, that halavai that everybody would have that kind, but I hear what you're saying. People I think were more into crazy drugs in the 60s and 70s, right? Moshe Feinstein has that famous tshuva about smoking pot in 65. A funny tshuva, right? In other words, he's like going like this to say it's usher. It's usher because it's against kibbutz. It's usher, But if somebody was really asking the question, and the Mishpacha magazine, somebody, this Rabbi Neuberger, I think, wrote, I don't think he's related to is he?
No.
So he wrote this piece about how the fact that Jersey legalized pot, is going to change yeshivas. So I'm not so sure 100% I agree with you. I think it's like what we discussed in the mall today. It's that the world, and maybe it starts with, this is simplistic, I don't think it's insightful, but you and I watched Happy Days in the 70s, right? So Richie Cunningham's father was like a shtickle bumbling, but he was lovable, and his parents were menschlich and respectful. And by the time he got a couple years later to Married with Children, they were perverted, and they were and they were like the Simpsons. I know I don't want to get in trouble because I know there are people who swear by the Simpsons, but I'm just saying the whole idea that
I'm not one of them.
The fathers are dunce. No, Daniel Feldman, who's a big Talmid Chacham, was written about 10 Sfarim. Could write an 11th sefer about the Simpsons, but it changed. And again, this is also simplistic. But JFK was doing Kol Davar Asur in the White House, but it wasn't. When Bill Clinton did Kol Davar Asur in the White House, it changed the world. I remember your cousin, Yael Schwechter, then Rabbi Wienerkur, said, I hate President Clinton, because she was 8 years old watching the news, and it's, so the world has changed. It's like, now everybody, there's nobody who's in charge. So kids don't, parents push the envelope, and kids push the envelope. People, I think, the era of the rabbi leaving when the people would do mixed dancing, that is not a thing anymore. It's understood. We're doing mixed dancing. Not that mixed dancing is the worst thing in the world. I don't want to get in big trouble here. If only all my students who went to secular universities went there with a girlfriend or boyfriend they met at HAFTR high school, 2 kids from Orthodox homes. Ooh, wah.
And stayed Orthodox.
That would be great. Right. That would be great. But still, that's changed. It's a little bit in your face. We do what we do. Too bad.
So how do you stay on top of that? How do you constantly keep your finger on the pulse with your kids, with your students, to know what their, to quote you, abnormal Yetzer Haras are?
It's hard because I am 61. I just told this to somebody recently. When I first year in Westchester, 85, 86, a kid, I was 26 years old, so I was still thinking I was cool, which is something Daniel Schwechter told me, my son-in-law, who is superstar Rebbi in Hechal Torah in Chinuch. So he told me that I told him.
That's called a shameless plug.
Yeah, T4. Yeah, Daniel Schwechter. Let him tutor your children at $300 an hour. Anyway, he also has a wife who grew up in the 5 towns. So
link in the description.
What?
Link in the description. You have to know how to follow it through.
He told me that I told him, don't try and show off to your Talmidim how cool you are at the age of 15. A, because it's not going to impress them, and B, because they'll just say, so I could do it too. And now my Inyan, but also Inyan, Rabbi Meir Twersky, who's a Rebbe in YU, I had him come and speak to HAFTR about 15 years ago. So I said, Meir, he acts and looks about 20 years older than I am, but he's my age. So I said, can I tell these guys you went to Harvard? So he said, no. I said, but you did. He said, right. But I grew up in my parents' house, and my grandfather, Soloveitchik, lived in my house. So if they had that situation, maybe. He said, but I don't want them thinking, oh, yeah, Twersky did it, I could do it. Right? So I told my son-in-law this. That being said, so I made that mistake. When I was 26, I thought I'd be the cool Rebbe. So a kid shows me a ticket to a rock concert. So first of all, it was Friday night. He didn't even realize he's not a from kid. Okay. So it's ticket, this is from the 80s, live at the Academy. So I had a shayla. Who's live at the Academy? Like, maybe everyone knows. You don't have to ask. Meaning it's such a big concert that if you have to ask who's performing, right? maybe the name of the group is the Academy. The kid says, no, Rabbi, the name of the group is Live. So that was mid-'80s, '90s, whatever. I double-checked it because I thought I might tell this story. Turns out they were ashamed of her a little bit in the '90s also. But, so it's a little harder because I don't understand the references, and I've a little bit reached that stage where it's like, oh, my gosh, that interests you? Like it's so profane. It's like that's another difference. That's another difference. If you went to a movie that was R-rated in the '70s, Jeff went. I didn't go. No, I'm joking. But if you went to a movie that I didn't know Jeff in the '70s. If you went to a movie that was R-rated in the '70s, it was Prust. Now that's PG-13 maybe. Hey, there were no.
Especially Netflix. Meaning, in all honesty, without lamenting it, but I'm just saying, even just a Netflix series, a TV show, got some good schora, as they say. In it.
Right.
So it's hard to make that mention.
I'm not correct. I'm not talking about the nudity,
right,
which you're correct, and and that kind of stuff. I was just honing in on the Nivell Peh. Just the words that appear in magazines that Keseder they have in their songs, it's mind blowing. So I don't know. It's hard. So the answer is you can't play the old man, but don't stoop to their level. But sort of like what I learned in 36 years in the classroom is don't fight every single fight. Pretend not to. If that's a big thing. Rabbi Willig's story. So I'm a division head, mid-'90s, Morashah, and it's Tisha B'Av. So Rabbi Willig, from Chatzos till the end of the fast, reads. Doesn't learn. He reads. What does he read? Like he reads, English Judaic history. He's not reading, schmutz, right? He's reading things that are. So at one point I walk near him and he says to me, without looking up from the book he's reading, he says, Louis, this guy's shooting off like rockets. I said, yeah. He said, yeah, I thought so. He said, I know if I look up, that will have, given them a certain pleasure. Oh, look, Rabbi Willig saw us. He said, I haven't looked up from my book in an hour and a half, right? So that's a chachma. That's a chachma to not hear, the kid who right before class starts throws off the F-bomb, right? And you don't have to make a whole to-do about it because inevitably, if you're a good enough Rebbe and they respect you a little bit, the kids will go, they'll like point to you. You don't have to do it. They did your work for you.
Right. I think you're saying a very important yesod. You can be relevant without stooping to their level. You can understand their video games. You can know the names. You can know the names of the movies. Nothing beyond that. But that they mention it. You say, oh, I thought that movie was rated whatever. But you're into the culture. You understand the culture. But at the end of the day, they know that you're not part of that culture, and you have to toe that line so that you're relevant to them. You're not some old bumbling man, but that you're nevertheless not on their level. They know that they can't get you to do certain things. But
today it's so hard. Just this is lamenting because you want to mention, the most power of podcasts out there. It's not crude. Joe Rogan. He's a wise guy. Do you know that? Do you know?
I'm not holding.
All right. So I'm one up on you.
You're like 1,000 up on me.
So you mentioned Joe Rogan. He's a relatively clean guy. Okay. And you mentioned this to your Talmidim, but every other word is a swear word.
Oh, it is.
And his basis, he's an MMA mixed martial, the UFC. He's a commentator, so that's what he does. Which, as a sport, that's not boxing anymore. That's almost what Netflix did to rated R movies is what the UFC did to boxing. Boxing was a sport. UFC is a sport. Understood. I don't want to get in trouble here, but I'm just saying
it's killing each other.
It's killing each. I mean, that's a brutal sport. That's something way further down the road. My Rebbe used to cry about boxing. He didn't know. Rabbi Telner from Ner Yisrael didn't know. UFC didn't exist. You put two guys in a cage. So that's what he is. So you're mentioning that, and there you have the UFC, that whole Torah in there, and then you have the swearing every other word.
I want to point something out. People from Ner Yisrael talk about Rabbi Telner. He's in the next world now, correct?
Correct.
But I'm saying you could have a Rebbe like that who's so tamim that he doesn't even know. As long as you have the other Rebbeim in the school who do know about it. Meaning, because if you have a building full of Rebbeim who don't understand where the kids are at, so that's disastrous. That applies in yeshivas, and that applies in Monorthodox day schools too. But as the rabbi said, don't stoop to their level. But I find also my white hair enables me to subtly say things that they hear that they wouldn't hear from a 30-year-old. Right, so
you as the Rebbe 30, you were trying to say things they wouldn't listen, and now
I thought I had to be a certain person. Now I realize, I think I heard this from your Rebbe, my friend, that at 40 he thought this, at 60 he realized nobody cares about you anyway. Just do what you are. And now I actually have a granddaughter who's in 9th grade. So over and over I said this year. I said, I got a grandchild your age, not a child, a grandchild your age. But there's things they have to hear. This, that whatever it might be about that I should have taken notes. I had a freshman boys class this year that I more than once I gave, Musar without, singling anyone out, just in general, talk about something that I know resonated, that I know they heard. A couple of kids didn't want to hear it, but
when they hear certain things that come from the white-haired 61-year-old, it makes a bigger impact than when you were 30 and you said those same things. It's
so.
because they whoa, whoa, they think you're over the hill, but then when you can relate to them, and it's not even contemporary things, but when you say something that resonates with them and that makes sense to them. I just recently spoke to, I'll leave out the name of the place, but I just recently spoke to a boys' yeshiva of guys here that are floundering. They're trying to find themselves. And the guys went nuts, and it was a schmooze that I give often to adults, to women, to girls' schools. I mean, it was something that it was, but it hit them at the right moment. And what struck them is that somebody who looks like me, they expect to come in and say, Apis, maybe you should think of this, and I said it in a way that was, just a word or two, not trying to fake anything. But just a word or two, and it was something that really impacted them very, very deeply.
I had a Parsha class, 9th grade, 2 different 9th grade girls' classes this year. So, it's very easy to teach Parsha class when you have Vortlach, Brachus and Shmos. What do you do, right? So once I hit Vayikra, which has the more mitzvahs, I think, certainly per pasuk than any of the other. So I basically went to Torah Masorah. There's like a website, a guy has like pictures of each mitzvah, interesting, and I just scrolled it on the board. So at Parshas Emor, so I'm literally going through the mitzvahs, just, the ones that, that I still didn't know they're mitzvahs, even though I'm like, right? Okay, forget those. But like Pidyon Peter Chamor, what? But, so Emor, so I said Isha, Grusha, right? So Isha, I'm a Balkore, so of course I just drew a total blank. But anyway, so, here's who a Kohen can't marry. So you got to be careful. You got to be careful for a number of reasons, which, whatever. Yeah. But the point is...
Fathers and boyfriends.
Yeah, right. So I said, number one, I don't want anyone walking out here saying that just the fact that a Kohen can't marry a divorcee and the fact that a Kohen can't marry a loose, wanton woman doesn't mean a divorcee is a loose, wanton woman. So number one. Now, that's a side point because, divorce, how many kids did you know from divorced homes growing up?
One in our class.
Right, same thing with me.
And when you talked about it, you whispered.
Exactly. So, and listen, the Chumash has it, and it's a whole Masechta, so it exists. But for whatever reason, it just wasn't done in the world we grew up in. And now it's more common. No value judgment made, just facts. So you got kids in the class whose parents not married to one another. They need to hear. Wienerkur said that the only thing they have in common is a Kohen can't marry them. That the Kohen has more rules. In no way are they the same. I said, number one. Number two, and my kids told me I shouldn't have said this. I was going to get canceled. I said, number two, what does it mean a loose, wanton woman? I said, if there's a girl in this school, I said, of course not in this school, maybe in SKA, standard joke, which is how I do it, right? And that was what you say, I did it on this podcast too. I said, not in HAFTR, right? So I said, there's a girl in the school who kisses her boyfriend, right? And I always use that, right? In other words, I revert to there are other Lashonos that they use, which have changed since we were kids and now, and a couple in between. But I always go with what?
Like Tamar and Yehuda, right? They kissed, right?
So very good. So I always teach that, and I quote your wife actually, because I always say that this. I said Akiva's third grade rabbi wrote us a note saying we're going to skip the 38th parak of Brachus, but Mashiach is born, so I have to tell the boys Mashiach is born. Yael Schwechter, who was the classic nerd who, vomited back literally everything the teacher ever said, right? So, like I joked that if we sent her to the Lawrence Public Schools, the Inwood Public Schools, she would come home and study dates with Chinuch and Shawanda, right? Those would be. She would just, find a kid who's gonna study. I hope I don't get canceled on that. But anyway, so she came home 2-3 years later and said, "My mother said that we're in a rush, so we went straight from Lamed Zayin to Lamed Tes. But Mashiach is born at the end of Parak Lamed Ches."
That's creative.
Right.
Yeah.
So Shashi Wogi said she asked her class, "What's this parak rated?" Mora is not rated anything. Shem put it in the Chumash. We're going to learn it. Whatever. V'shiches arza. I don't want to know how. But no, fourth grader doesn't understand anyway. Okay. So when I teach that, I always say, okay, it's 9th grade or 12th grade. You skipped it in 3rd grade. And of course, every single kid goes, "This story's in Chumash, right? We skipped this story." I said, good. So if you could learn biology and you could watch Netflix, you could now hear this story as I'm going to tell it. I said, my face might turn red. I always do, show them that I'm also shtickle uncomfortable. My face might turn red. And if something happens, it's that somebody says the wrong thing, everyone's taught to giggle for 15, 20 seconds, and then we got to move on. Right? In other words, because you don't want to be that, that you had a Rebbi who was like, you giggled at that wrong moment, out of the room, right? Like, what did that accomplish? Shkoyach, right? So, you have to know how to work that. So I said, okay, number one, the fact that a wanted woman can't marry a Kohen and a Grusha, divorcee can't marry, has nothing to do with, they're not the same, number one. And number two, I said, if a girl in HAFTR high school accidentally kisses her boyfriend, she's not a wanton woman. You need to hear this.
Even though we call her that,
because
right?
that's all you need to know, right? Like, I did whatever when I was in 11th grade or whatever, or even college. No, it's not what it means. I said, and third of all, and here's where I really got in trouble with my kids. I said, it's the world now, men and women are the same. I said, guess what? They're not the same. Because you heard the joke I made. If a guy in high school has a lot of girlfriends, he's a player. And if a girl in high school has a lot of boyfriends, I'm not going to say the word she is. But that doesn't change in every time and in every, like the Sefer Chinuch, b'chol makom, b'chol zman, right? A guy who has a lot of girlfriends, he's cool. A girl who has a lot of boyfriends, she's not cool, even though she could say nivel peh, like she couldn't say it. A girl said nivel peh in our day was a truck driver, right? A girl who drank in our day was a truck driver. Nothing against truck drivers, but it was a euphemistic way of saying not fine. So, I don't know how I got there. But no, so the point is maybe I can get away with that but also these things they need to hear. If I said it when I was 30, I was too close to their age. Now I'm 80. Maybe I'm wrong, but
there are boundaries to that, but you're not wrong.
You would not have said necessarily everything I said, right? But no, I'm not insulting.
No, I don't think I would have.
I would take that. I would put that in my playbook. I think that's a great way of I mean, I do that when I had Talmidim in yeshiva. That's what you spell it out. Don't leave room because they know everything.
Correct. I'm just saying of the lashon.
Okay.
Just the way it's presented. I probably would be a little bit calmer. But honest and straightforward is the thing.
Better they should. I hear you, but I'm saying I could promise you this, and this has nothing to do with anything. But again, I'm in a very good school. I'm not just saying that because the silliness. I happen to be in a very good school. So and we send kids to very good universities. And so I'll have a parent say to me, Mike, and it still happens, my kid's not going to that boys' school or that girls' school because there's teachers telling them, become more religious. I said, number one, the schools already learned their lessons. They know that if school A gets a reputation, don't send your kids to this university. Then the modern schools, not just us, Frisch, SAR, Ramaz, Kushner, Westchester, they're not going to send their kids. I said, it's not that. I said, it's the Shana kids. Meaning some 19-year-old kid, a second-year kid is whispering in your kid's ear, don't go there, don't do this, become frummer. I said, so you're not okay with a kid from an Orthodox home who got a little frummer whispering in your kid's ear. Your kid's at Columbia University next year with a kid who's whispering crazy things in your kid's ear, that you're okay with. I couldn't have said that at the age of 30. And the still parents will get annoyed about it now. But now I'm older than the parents. I taught the parents. So the age helps there that I could say that message. They still don't want to hear it, but they'll say, okay.
Fascinating.
So Rebbi in the classroom, Rav in the shul. What's the most important thing that you need to bring to the table?
Oh, pashut. It's not knowledge. That goes without saying. you have to know stuff, right? Like Rabbi Schechter has a joke. Rabbi Schechter's very funny. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. He's really funny. So Rabbi Schechter says that he had a guy who got smicha from YU who had a sad thing. The man died childless. So the rabbi in the shul didn't know. He said, I'm okay if the guy didn't learn Yevamis, right? Ani rochav alachama, right? Erev in Yevamis, maybe Nazir, Nida, whatever. He said, but he doesn't know it's a pasuk in Chumash. So ballpark, you got to know, you know, and there's things that I've learned over the years. Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, my gosh, right? Like words, and I'm Balkore, words you pronounce wrong for 5, 10, 20, 40 years. Okay. So, but it can't be about you. It can't be about you. And you have to say, you know, what can I do to make it better for this person? If you don't have that, then you don't show up. Like I've had, I'm sure you have too, although you were in the classroom less than I. I've had people I work with who, like, just don't like the kids, right? Either they're burnt out or they never like the kids. And you're right. And certainly sometimes limud echol, you have somebody who just teaches chemistry or just teaches, you know, algebra. I think the way to make a difference is know the kid. Like you have to know Basher Husham. Like I was teaching a guy. I said, you know, this guy, his father died when he was a little kid. I didn't know. How do you not know? Meaning guys like me, you know, I wear it on my sleeve. So do the kids who have these crazy stories. So you got to know, you got to care, and it can't be about you. So and this is the hardest thing to do. And this is a learning thing for me, that I'll work with a kid, you know, and then the kid will move to the next stage. And okay, who are you? Okay, you know, it's not simple, but you know, you have to be a grown up. So
because it was about you. So it was about the kid.
Yeah.
You know, there's the title of a book. Just Love Them.
Oh, I read that book. Unbelievable book.
Unbelievable book. But there has to be a caveat to that. You have to love them for them. It's what you're saying.
Rabbi Shrink, right?
Yeah,
Rabbi Shrink.
Yeah, which is, I mean, he was off the charts. But you have to love them, but you also have to do something with them, which he did. But I'm just saying that you can't it's not just about loving them and therefore, you know, letting them get away with things and just because you love them, but it has to be, you have to hope for them and to try to give them things that they're going to use, not shape them, but give them things that they're going to use to be able to shape their lives and make the right decisions.
I would also add two things and then tell over the best story in that book. And that is that it's still a little bit, but certainly much more so 36 years ago, it was much more intimidating when you had the person who was be'etzim nicer than you and be'etzim smarter than you, and a guy like that who simply didn't care how he looked, but he just wanted to make the world a better place. So, and I'm not that guy. So you have to know yourself and you have to say, you know, it would be nice if I'd be that guy, but I'm not that guy. So that's a hard thing to do in the Beis Medrash, and certainly when you walk into the classroom, realize that, you know, you have to be able to do, you know, not everybody's going to be Wayne Gretzky.
Gotcha.
Right? So
even I know who that is.
That was the point. That's the point, because he was so much better than anyone before and after, right? He didn't just break the records, he shattered the records. So there's going to be people like this Rabbi Trink, and so you have to say to yourself, no way I'm ever going to be that guy. But you have to do, now the best story in the book is somebody comes to him and says, guys from Adelphia, I think they have a TV in their room. So he says, where'd you hear? You know, I was on the bus with them. Did you talk to them in learning? No. He said, wait. So the things, you know, the things that they're trying to hide, that you want to proclaim to the world. What makes them human beings, what they're learning, where they're holding, that you don't know. You shouldn't see them at all. Like, brilliant. That's brilliant. But again, I hear it, you know, because there are those who will say that people like me set the bar too low. And one of the things your father, truthfully, to his credit, did in his Rabbanos was he set the bar very high. And there's, you know, V'rabim Heishiv Mi'avon, but also more than a couple people got ticked off. Like, you know, people, there are people who, you know, will say, you know, you're expecting mediocrity. I hear it, but...
Look at the Paris 36 years later.
Right.
So don't worry about what those people say. You look at the Paris.
Correct.
And I say the Paris because anybody who says to me that they even know the name HAFTR, I say, you know Rabbi Wienerkur?
It's just whatever. That's
okay. I'm not trying to give you a comment. I am, but
again, Jeffrey's auditioning to speak at my funeral should he outlive me. So, okay, that wasn't bad. That wasn't bad.
You're not speaking about
Oh, of course not. That'll be an interesting question at the 120. How's that going to work? How's that going to work? I'd like to know. Is it going to be all seven? All seven? You're going to have to get up there? That's a nice conversation.
No, that is a horrible conversation. Thank you very much.
It's 120.
This is why you don't have a podcast. And now we know.
I'm behaving.
Okay, thank you very much. We can get into Zadie, but I think we've done justice.
You call me another time.
We'll do another one. We can do it.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Hey.
1 second. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for listening. And if you're listening on YouTube, please leave a like and a comment. It always helps us. And he's out. Pass the Chulent.